We all want to be strong leaders, build great connections with our team, and get the most out of them for our businesses, but also for them. But somewhere along the lines, we decided that strong leadership meant radical transparency. We're going to tell the team absolutely everything because that is what good leaders do. We share the stress because we're all in this together, and we're vulnerable because that shows connection. And we also show the mess because, well, we're human too. And sometimes that does build trust. But sometimes, and actually more often than not, what that does is it creates anxiety for our teams. It fuels speculation and it distracts the team from executing at their best. Because people don't just receive information, they have a funny way of simulating the future with it. And if you hand them uncertainty without structure, they will build their own narrative. And unfortunately, often it is a negative one. Today, I want to talk about the difference between radical transparency and strategic silence and how to communicate the truth without creating instability. So, what is the transparency trap? There is a strong cultural shift towards vulnerability in leadership. And I actually support vulnerability in leadership. I think humanity in leadership matters deeply. However, unmanaged disclosure is not the same as authentic leadership. If you were to go to your team and say something along the lines of, we are considering a pivot, cash flow may be tight, we may need to restructure, or we're exploring a new partnership, but you cannot answer for them what it means for them and the organization, what happens next, what is going to stay stable, and some of the aspects that are going to change, you've created a condition where exposure does not have containment. And transparency without a container becomes noise, drag, and debris. Noise has a tendency to become big emotions, maybe even fear. And that fear can become disengagement. Now, for founders that have a small team, what it may look like is all of a sudden your best salesperson starts updating their resume. Your clients start to sense some instability and your productivity dips. For our corporate leaders, it might look something like political maneuvering, morale fluctuations, and spikes in the rumor mill. The intention was trust, but the outcome was anxiety. So let's talk about strategic silence. And I want to define this for you clearly because strategic silence is not secrecy. It is not dishonesty and it is not manipulation. Strategic silence is temporary discretion paired with active direction. You're not hiding the truth. You are timing disclosure responsibly. There are moments in our leadership where information is real, but it's not yet defensible. What I mean by that is we might have early acquisition conversations, maybe some unvalidated pivots. There could be funding negotiations or individual performance issues that need to be tended to carefully. It might be something like sensitive research and development. And if you disclose those situations too early, you actually create instability that you may not be able to manage. So here is the nuance. You cannot leave a vacuum because when leaders do go quiet, our teams start to make assumptions. So instead of filling the vacuum with raw details, you start filling it with stability and direction. Here's what you might say. This is what is going to remain stable during this time. Here's what we are going to focus on as we navigate this pivot. Here's what success looks like over the next week, the next month. And here's when you are going to hear from me next. That alone reduces the anxiety and big emotions for our teams. So let's put this into a framework that we can use. Before I share something sensitive, I ask myself 4 questions. Number 1, what is the harm if I disclose it now? Is there potential legal exposure? Client risk? Is my team going to churn? Might there be some market reaction or an internal distraction that keeps us away from getting our business done at its best? Number 2, is there harm in withholding it temporarily? Might I run into an ethical breach, a trust erosion, credibility damage? Now, if withholding causes real harm, then you need to disclose. However, if disclosing causes real harm, then you have to pause. The third question you need to ask is, can I attach clarity to this information? Can I answer these questions for myself? What happens next? What this actually means? What is going to stay stable for my team and myself and my organization? And what do people need to do in order to navigate through this? If you cannot provide clarity for yourself, then you are not ready to release it. The fourth question that you need to ask yourself as a leader or business owner, and this one requires honesty, is, am I sharing this to serve the organization or preserve my own pressure? Sometimes oversharing is not transparency, it's emotional offloading. And so your team should not have to metabolize your unprocessed stress. So let's put this into a real scenario. I want you to imagine that you are a founder. You have a senior team member whose performance has been declining over the past couple of months, and you're seriously considering terminating. The decision hasn't been finalized yet, and you are still documenting, still evaluating, but the tension is visible and your team is feeling it. They're not sure what they're feeling, but they're definitely feeling it. So you have a couple of options. Radical transparency might sound something like this. We're having issues, as you know, with the leadership performance, and I don't know what's going to happen next. What that's going to do for your team is it's going to create speculation. They're going to choose sides. It might even have a bump up in internal politics and create fear. Now, I'm not saying strategic silence doesn't mean you do nothing. No, what it is you're going to say something along this lines. As we continue to strengthen the leadership team, I'm reviewing the structure performance across all of the departments. My focus is to provide stability and clarity for the team, and if there are any changes in the upcoming future that affects everyone, I'm going to communicate with you very directly and very clearly. Now, notice the difference. What this does is acknowledge the reality. It communicates oversight and it signals direction. It avoids exposing any individual and it reduces the risk of rumor escalation. You're not lying. You're not dumping details. You're containing the situation and facing the reality of it. Now, let's fast forward and say you've finalized that decision. At that point in time, the transparency shifts. So you may say something along the lines, after careful consideration, we've decided to make a leadership change. This decision was not something we entered into lightly, and our priority now is to provide stability for the team and moving forward. Here's what is going to remain the same, and here are the shifts that you're going to see. And here's what I need you to focus on so that we can get through this together. Now that is truth, clarity, containment that builds trust. So the last thing I want to address is that there is an important difference between professional intimacy and emotional dumping. People do want to feel connected with their leadership. They do want to know what you think, what you value, what you've learned, and how you've overcome the mistakes over the years. That is where vulnerability belongs. In those moments, you can 100% share where you've misjudged, what you've learned along the line, the values that have guided decisions that you've made, how you are growing. But you do not need to share any unprocessed emotions, any internal political tensions, any speculative scenarios, or anything that is sensitive that really the rest of the team shouldn't know. Now, that vulnerability, it builds culture. And discipline to know when and when not to disclose builds security. And leaders do need both. The goal isn't to be radically transparent, and the goal also is not to be guarded. It is to be steady, calm, and provide your team the leadership that they need and deserve. The leaders who win long term are perceived as two things at the same time. They are both honest and disciplined. They are both transparent and contained. Because teams don't just follow truth, they follow stability, calmness, and it helps them thrive. Now, if this does resonate with you, I would love to hear your experience. Where have you seen transparency go wrong? And where have you seen silence actually create a stronger team? Because mastering this balance, that is executive mastery.